what is your take on illegal crosses to Canada? I would like to begin with this question.
Sure. Well, I want to be very clear. The Conservative Party of Canada always has and always will support immigration to Canada. I mean, there are so many people in this country who have come here, who have worked hard, and have helped make this country what it is today. Vibrant pluralism, that's something that we need to maintain. The question in Canada is not if we should have immigration, that's not up for debate, it's how, right? And so that's the concern that we have with people who are entering the country illegally from the United States of America, which is another country that a lot of people want to go to, and then claiming asylum in Canada. And this is in contravention with the spirit of an agreement that we have with the U.S. that is supportive of the Convention on Refugees. And to me, there's been a lot of resources that have been spent on people who are coming into the country through this manner and are essentially kind of jumping the queue, while there's so many other people who are trying to come to Canada legally. So I think, given that we're now at a position where this government, the Trudeau government, has spent well over $1 billion on 40,000 people who to date have crossed into Canada, hotel rooms, social assistance payments, and there's so many backlogs that have been created because of the resources that have been directed to this, that we need a reset in priorities, and that's something that we want to do.
And what was the message of Prime Minister Trudeau to President Trump and created the United States when he tweeted about a year and a half ago that you are welcome to Canada if you are not welcomed in US?
Well, first of all, I have to say Canada is a sovereign nation. We have the responsibility to manage our borders and our immigration system according to our own policy. The tweet that Justin Trudeau put out in January of 2017, it was #Welcome to Canada, and it was in direct response to a decision that the American administration had made on their own sovereign immigration policy. It felt like kind of a poke in the eye, I think, but all of that aside, the Prime Minister's first priority, government's first priority, especially in a country like Canada, should be managing an immigration system that is fair, that's orderly, and that is compassionate. And to me, and I mean the media reported on how many emails Canadian embassies had gotten after that tweet, calls. It was very clear that that tweet, I think, put a lot of misperceptions out on what Justin Trudeau was doing in terms of our immigration priorities. And since then, that mistake has cost Canadians a lot. It's cost Canadians that are trying to bring their family members into Canada long delays, unfair waiting lists, a lot of expenses and taxes while their taxes are going up. And this is something that in an election year, we hope to correct.
So what about issue with those refugees? The Liberal government brought them. And on the other hand, we see other refugees stranded all over the world.
Well, I think that having a conversation in Canada, while it's not going to be super popular for the Liberals, we need to have a conversation about what constitutes a refugee in this country. I want to be very clear. I think that Canada has an obligation and a responsibility to help the world's most vulnerable through resettlement. I think that's very important. It's something we've been known for across partisan flavors, and we need to continue that. The objection that I have to allowing people to enter Canada illegally from the US and then claim asylum is that you can make a very strong argument that these are not the world's most vulnerable. People who have reached the United States have reached a safe third country. You don't have to take my word for it. Justin Trudeau even said that. And so then we need to look at, well, who are we prioritizing? I've been working with genocide victims from northern Iraq. They are now in Canada, and they've been told that some of their family members, it's going to take 7, 8+ years to get processed to come to Canada. I talked to, for example, some persecuted minorities who are internally displaced in Afghanistan from the Sikh community. They have really no way to come to Canada. And I think that we need to have a conversation on how we select people, how we prioritize people, because we can't resettle the world. We have to look at ways to create durable solutions for people that are persecuted around the world, Canada's role in that. But when it comes to resettlement, we should be prioritizing the world's most vulnerable, and we haven't had a conversation about that in some time. And I think that that has been exacerbated by Justin Trudeau allowing this situation to happen at the Quebec-Vermont border crossing, or New York, yes.
So what would our opposition do about those Pakistani Christians who are thousands stranded in Bangkok, in Thailand? They're extremely poor people, and I'm not hearing anything from our government.
Sure, so 2 points. First of all, I went out and called for one very high-profile case for Canada to resettle and welcome as a refugee Asia Bibi and her family. I understand that it's not just the Pakistani Christian community that's having an issue in Bangkok, it's other groups as well too that have contacted my office. That the problem with Thailand in terms of what's happening there, for your viewers who might not understand, is that Thailand is not a party to the Refugee Convention, so they don't have the same types of processes to apply for refugee status. I'm oversimplifying that other countries do, which makes it difficult for us to intervene. And we saw this in the case of the young Saudi woman who was just welcomed to Canada a few months ago. In her case, what ended up happening was the United Nations intervened and gave her status, but it begs a broader question of what we do with internally displaced persons, especially in countries that aren't party to the Refugee Convention. So this is why what my party is suggesting, the Conservative Party of Canada, is that we look at our refugee selection processes, both within the government-sponsored stream, so that's where the government sponsors people, as well as the privately sponsored stream, and ask ourselves if we are prioritizing people correctly. One of the things that we hear over and over again is that internally displaced persons aren't eligible for resettlement through the UN process. We'd like to fix that. We've committed to fixing that. And then certainly to people that are facing immediate persecution that can't make it to a refugee camp for resettlement to Canada, we need to be addressing those people. So these are concrete policy ideas that we've put forward and we will be talking about in the upcoming election.
So linked with immigration policies and refugee settlement, we don't see clearly good policies from a Liberal government in terms of helping new Canadians and refugees to assimilate and integrate in our society.
Well, I think that the concept of integration, that's the word I would use, integration into our pluralism is important. I've met with a lot of groups, new Canadian groups especially, who talk about the pride of integrating into Canada's economic and social fabric. And what does that mean? For me, that means learning one of Canada's official languages, becoming self-sufficient, and understanding and upholding the rights and responsibilities that one has as a Canadian. And those are three areas that I feel can be accomplished simultaneously. I do feel that the government has a role to play in those things, but how those happen, like we're not seeing a lot of consistent policy in that right now. If you look to the Syrian Refugee Initiative as an example, many Syrians sort of came to Canada, they had the big photo op by the Prime Minister, but there are questions about, okay, well, are we supporting people through their language training? What about access to housing, especially when there's other Canadians that are looking for the same thing? And this is why you can't just make resettlement about numbers of people. We have to have a long-term budgeted plan in the context of a balanced budget and lower taxes to deal with integration. And that is something that we are also proposing changes to so that newcomers to Canada can have a successful experience in the upcoming election.
And when we see that our Liberal government has spent over $1 million on new Canadians during their tenure, but we don't see them spending any money to help understand our new Canadians about Canadian culture, since our Prime Minister denounced core Canadian culture. So is that an issue with Conservative Party?
Well, I'm not sure what the Prime Minister's position is on this issue. First of all, the $1 billion that he spent was specifically, that I referenced earlier, was specific to people who were illegally entering the country and then claiming asylum. I have raised the issue of the content of Canada's Citizenship Guide. This is, the document that anybody coming to Canada is going to be reviewing prior to their citizenship exam. One of the leaked copies of their revised draft actually had the responsibility to become self-sufficient removed from that language, as well as dealing with other very sensitive but important topics. And so we push back on that. I think that, going back to the conversation we just had, we have to focus on integration, and that being measured by people coming to Canada having a successful experience, being able to participate in the Canadian economy and Canadian culture. But I also think that we need to be talking about the rights and responsibilities. People have rights when they come to Canada, they also have responsibilities. And those are things that we could be talking about in, for example, pre-arrival services or in our citizenship guide process. And those are things that I think we should be augmenting and discussing within Parliament.
And lastly, I would ask your take on parent and grandparent program.
Yes. Oh boy. Okay, this is just crazy. So in 2006, if you go back in history, when Stephen Harper became Prime Minister, the Liberals had left the Conservatives a backlog of, I think it was over 100,000 cases of parents and grandparents. So what the Liberals had done for years was basically create an endless no-hope waiting list. So when you look at the number of actual spots, like people that were actually allowed to come to Canada under this program, it's been about the same between Stephen Harper's government and Justin Trudeau's government. But the immigration minister, he went out and he tried to pull a fast one on Canadians. He said, well, we increased the number of spots. But all he did was increase the number of spots on the waiting list. So all that does is make people wait for a longer period of time. There's actually an article today that fact-checked their statement. It was found to be quite false. So I think people need to understand that when the Liberals say we've created more spots, all they've done is created spots on a waiting list. That is not the same as spots to come to Canada. And this is why I'm saying we should be questioning when the Liberals spend $1 billion on people illegally entering the country versus putting the resources in place around processing and supporting people who are legally trying to come to Canada.
Thank you, MP.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Thank you
time.
for your time.
Thank you.